You're listening to the Sketchnote Army podcast. I'm your host, Mike Rohde, the author of the Sketchnote Handbook and the Sketchnote Workbook, and this is the podcast where I chat with sketchnoters and visual thinkers and try to understand what makes them tick. This season of the Sketchnote Army podcast is presented to you by the Sketchnote Handbook's 10th birthday, and we're giving you the gifts. Save 50% when you buy any two of the Sketchnote Handbook, the Sketchnote Workbook, or the Sketchnote Handbook video together as a set. Offer applies to both the print and ebook editions of the books. Use discount code HAPPY10 at checkout to apply savings. That's HAPPY10. For details on this offer, visit rodesign.com/happy10. That's rodesign.com/happy10. Offer ends December 31st, 2022, so buy yours today. And now, on with the show. Hello everyone, this is Mike, and I am here with Tanvi Agarwal. Tanvi, so good to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm very thrilled for this conversation.
Well, I'm thrilled too. I've seen your work, and it's really great, and you're an interesting person, and those things line up really well for podcast guests, because I'm always looking for interesting, different people to expand people's minds and awareness of what's going on in the visual thinking world. So why don't we start with who you are and what you do?
Well, so I draw for a living. Like that is what I've been inculcating in myself, not to identify as like one small label of, where my work goes. So I basically draw for a living. But for clients, I'm an illustrator and a sketchnoter. For people who want to learn, I am also into educating. I have my own cohorts and courses around sketchnoting and doodling. Apart from all of that, I really love to like try different mediums of art. So sometimes I'll paint a bottle or maybe some surface in my house, including walls or like just anything random that just, intrigues me. So I just love to practice different forms of art, and most of them tie up around drawing.
And it looks to me, when I looked at your site, that you have worked with some pretty well-known companies with your drawing, your illustration, your sketchnoting. Can you tell us a little bit about that work specifically?
Yes, so I've worked with IBM, Roche, and I've conducted a couple of workshops for some good companies like Ernst& Young, Google, Immobi. So usually like with the sketchnoting side, like we all know, there's some event that, we are there to capture. Since my business started off during the pandemic, most of my experience has been virtual. I think like before the pandemic happened, there was like a month or two where, I could actually have in-person workshops. But after that, it was all online. And even with the sketchnoting gigs, I think IBM's one workshop is what I actually, went to the venue and did a live sketchnoting. Other than that, everything has been online. So yes, like I've worked with a couple of good brands, and like the sketchnoting projects have been like really, really interesting. But there are so many smaller brands. Like my entire forte, like the foundation of my design thinking was branding, because that is where I started. So I've worked with a lot of smaller brands, people who had products that were ready to launch and stuff. Some cafes that were opening up, and they needed wall murals and branding and packaging everything. So I think some of my most interesting projects have been around branding. But I believe that like my illustration skills, like there was little about the illustration skills there, and more about my sketchnoting brain that worked on like those projects.
Mm-hmm. This sounds great. Can you tell us? I'm really curious how you ended up in this place where you're drawing for a living. You're working for big and small brands. You're doing branding work and sketchnoting of events, mostly online, but also it sounds like you've done some in person. How did you end up in this place? Were you always drawing as a kid? What did you go to school for? Like, was there some light bulb moment that happened that sent you in this direction?
Yes, indeed, there was one. So yes, I've always been like one of those creative kids who draws a lot, does a lot of craft work. So when I was a kid, I hated crayons and pastels. I just loved to paint and sketch. But my parents put me to the normal art school that we have in India, and there were like these stages where you have to start with filling in colors in sheets that already have a drawing, and then you move to crayons and pastels, and then you move to painting. And I hated that part because I hated crayons, so I never really went to a drawing school as such. Like I ran away from my drawing school very early. But I kept drawing. I would just find references online, I would recreate them. There were these amazing shows called Mad and Art Attack on our television, and I would follow them and do a lot of craft work. So I think till college, it was all like craft and a lot of acrylic painting, but never really a lot of doodling or drawing. And I took up engineering. I did computer science engineering. And I think in my third year is when I realized that I don't have the passion for engineering. Like I still like to study. I was a good kid. I scored good marks, but I never saw myself actually, getting into anything extra that needed like
Mm.
my passion and dedication, whereas all my friends were doing that. So I realized this was probably not my calling. And that is when a friend of mine who was starting, like who was working on his startup, just asked me to make a logo. And trust me, at that point, I had no idea what Adobe Photoshop or Illustrator or any of these tools were. I did not even know they existed for such purposes. I only knew MS Paint. So I drew a logo on paper. He loved the logo. And then he asked me that, okay, I need a digital file. That is when like it all went, oh my God, what do I do next? So I went back home. My younger sister was doing this, graphic design course, and she introduced me to Adobe Illustrator. And that is the first time when I actually saw myself putting in effort for something not that was not about the marks or the degree or anything related to that. And I just understood, like that was like my light bulb moment that I want to do something in this direction. There was still a lot of like I don't know, because like in India you don't really see a very good, like at least back then there was not a very well established art field that you could pursue as a career. So the only thing that I saw in front of myself was either I can go into VFX and animations, and probably work for Disney, Marvel someday, or it was that I can become a graphic designer at a marketing agency. So I took up the second option. I thought this is my calling. This is where I'll go. So I learned how to use Adobe Illustrator, Adobe Photoshop, and I loved teaching. So even then, like I organized a couple of Illustrator workshops in my college. I taught kids how to use that software. And like I was a part of a few events in college that gave me the confidence that okay, I can actually do something in this field, because I was creating stuff that was getting printed, and you can actually see your designs up somewhere. So that was like a big confidence boost. So I took up an internship in a marketing agency in Bangalore. I worked there as an intern for a few months. I joined there as a full-time employee, a junior graphic designer, right after my engineering. And like the culture of a marketing agency, especially in India, is very, very, very bad. In most agencies, not all, but in most agencies, like there's no work-life balance. You don't really get to do a lot of interesting stuff, especially when you're a junior graphic designer. Like there's nothing that you're actually doing of your own. It's just like you're getting briefs, and the senior designers are giving you an even more strict brief, and you're simply executing that. So 4 months, and I was completely burnt out. And I was like, okay, this is not something that I want to do. And I'm not sure if you would know, but there's this illustrator called Alicia Souza. And she's very popular, especially in India. And she does all these like, cartoony doodles, like very like relatable doodles. And for a very long time, I think for 4 months when I was in that job, I was like a typical wannabe Alicia Souza. I thought my life was super interesting, and I could pull out a lot of comedy stuff from my life, draw them out, put them on Instagram, and grow big. But I think in a month or two, I realized my life was not that fun. And I cannot pull out that many like good things, especially when I'm in a job that I don't like, or I'm not enjoying or learning or growing. So I think that was the second light bulb moment when I realized that, okay, I cannot be in this rat race of making relatable content for Instagram. So my Instagram, like I just like kind of stopped putting a lot of pressure on, making Instagram as the thing. So I was just creating, and I was reading a lot about like philosophy, psychology, and like human behavior and all these like deep stuff. So I would take up podcasts and I started to, put my thoughts into like visuals. So they all started with illustrations. And that is how like Silly Strokes is what it is right now. But yes, it all started at a stage where I thought like marketing and branding and like being a graphic designer was like what I thought I wanted to do. And like the pivot was just because I realized that okay, this is like when I was there doing what I thought I wanted to do. I realized that okay, probably not this. I wanted to do a little more of like something personal, something where I'm telling my stories, I'm telling something that I'm learning, or something that can help someone. So that was the space where I decided to quit my job in 4 months, and I became a full-time freelance illustrator.
Wow. It sounds to me like when I hear your story, you were course correcting almost like a ship does, right? When it's aiming for something and oh, there's a rock here, we have to correct a little bit and go around the rock. And then, oh, there's an island here, we have to go around this other side, right? Like engineering was the first rock, and you realized you didn't want to commit your life to that because it wasn't exciting. And then you
Yeah.
thought, well, some kind of graphic design, let's go in that direction. And you got excited about it, but then when the reality of being a junior designer, which, by the way, your experience in India is pretty much the experience probably all over the world. I'm a former print graphic designer, and that's kind of what it is. You're basically a
Yeah.
glorified production artist. So that's a pretty common experience, and you just have to, it's I guess the old term is paying your dues, right? Where you sort of grind through this work until you rise to the level of senior, and then you get a little more freedom
Yeah.
to do stuff. But um, so then you found that that wasn't a fit either, and now you've sort of again corrected your course toward illustration with this influence of Alicia. It sounds like so. It's all these things are kind of mixing together and sort of guiding you in a certain direction in the place where you're going. So that sounds really interesting. And so a couple of questions come to mind as I hear you tell your story. One, do you still find that your engineering background helps you in speaking with technology companies and being able to represent their information in a clear way? So that would be an interesting question. And how, could you have any examples or stories of when that has happened?
Definitely. Like for a very long time, I thought my degree was a total waste. Like it was 15 lakh rupees and 4 years just gone to dump, as my parents still think. But like, but yes, like I've seen and like I've got a lot of feedback from some of my clients as well. Like in the very like beginning of like my first few gigs, there was this client who just randomly came to me and asked that, "Are you by any chance from an engineering background?" And he could understand that by the ways in which I took a brief and
Mm.
implemented the brief and worked around the project. I still don't know what exactly made him like ask that question or identify that I'm from an engineering background. And that was the first time when I felt that okay, my degree is not a total waste. But anyways, like even now, like since most of my work, like the final product is an illustration that goes on to maybe a website, an app, maybe newsletters, emailers, or maybe wall murals. I've seen that a lot of these people who are executing the work in the final stage, like putting them in the technology, always struggle with a lot of designers in terms of like, okay, this is the ratio, this is the format, this is that, this is this, and this is how like the technology and the designs would like interweave. But I've seen that like all of my collaborations in this space have been very smooth because I think I understand where that tech person is coming from. Especially when it is about websites, because I think website developers have a very hard time with the graphic designers trying to make them understand how to get things done. So that is one big perk. But other than that, like recently, I've been working with a few tech companies. For example, IBM. Like I've made 3 sketch notes for them, and I think it is easier for me to understand their concepts and to be actually able to represent them in a way that makes sense to people who already know the technology.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like maybe not in very prominent ways that people will just be able to identify that okay, this is someone from an engineering background. But I think like it's just been easier on my part and on my client's part to give me the briefs. So I'm working with another tech company right now, and like we are doing newsletters for them where they try to explain a popular tech concept. So I think last we did on blockchain and how blockchain manages data. And like my client, she said that it would have been very difficult for me to pursue an idea like this had it been a designer who did not understand anything about the space. So I think this opens up a huge room for me to experiment and to actually take up challenging projects in terms of tech. So definitely, like my engineering background has helped me in like small ways that weave together into a big picture.
Almost like it's a subtle advantage that you have over
Yeah,
others. And probably when you work with those people who are used to working with designers or illustrators who don't understand those things,
yeah,
you must really stand out, right? Because you understand. And I feel the same way. I came from a production design background. I was a designer, but I had to produce all my own designs. Same thing with web design. I had to code it until we started hiring people. So having some, at least some awareness of what's going to happen and what's required just smooths it's sort of like it almost like the customer wouldn't know it unless they worked with someone who didn't have your skills, right? It's like
all right.
the thing that you are enjoying, but you don't realize that you're enjoying it until you're not enjoying it anymore, right? So that's
And I
really
think
great.
also, like in my style, especially with sketchnoting, the layouts, the connectors, and the flow of work,
Hmm.
like coding, like knowing how tech works, has had an influence in how I make my layouts and like my
Yeah.
containers and stuff.
Hmm.
Because like I've always seen that my lines are very straight, or like there's always like a block, and then I like to play around with that. And
Yeah.
like there's this indentation thing that I really like. It's just a part of like my style,
Mm.
crossing things out and highlighting things in like usually how the computer does it.
Yeah.
So I think there has been like a lot of influence. I think if I sit and actually try to analyze, I'll be able to come up with more.
Yeah.
But yes, I think engineering has had a good impact on
Mm.
my design system.
Yeah, and I would suspect that your graphic design as well, right? Because you were doing production graphic design for customers, so that probably also factors in addition to the engineering, which is great, right? You're like you said, what looked like or felt like was a waste
Yeah.
turned out to not be a waste. It was actually a great foundation, and you're finding a way to make use of it in your present situation. I think that's true of everything that we experience and we go through. If we are aware of it, we can actually make use of those experiences to do better work or to be aware of things other people are not aware of, right? Like, um, and have an advantage where you can make better work because of that awareness, which is pretty cool. Um,
Absolutely.
my second question was, so you've chosen the name Silly Strokes. Have you ever encountered a business who doesn't take you seriously or sort of doesn't understand the term? Or is it actually maybe the opposite? Maybe it actually is very attractive and it makes people smile and, light gives them a little more of a lighthearted approach so they know you're going to bring a little bit of humor. Like, tell me a little bit about the name and why you chose that name and how your customers react to it.
I think like why I chose that name, that is a very funny story. So I was not starting my Instagram page after deciding that, okay, engineering is done. I did not sit for my placements. I did not have a job. And I had a very low paying job in line as a junior graphic designer. And I told my mom that, okay, so, like I want to like, have an Instagram page where I'll start posting, the wannabe Alicia Souza phase. And it was almost like 3 months and I had not started that because I couldn't come up with a good name. And my mom was really angry that you're not like making use of your engineering degree, you're not doing a job, you're not starting your Instagram page. What is it that you don't want to do with life? And like because of that fear, I was like, okay, whatever is the first name that comes to me, I'll just like take that. So the first thing that I tried was Sketchy Dreams. And like now it doesn't sound good, but that time I was very happy with it. But luckily, like the Twitter handle was not available for that, and a friend of
Mm.
mine suggested that make sure that you have all the handles available.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a launch date for my Instagram in mind, all of these things like very sorted out, that okay, this is the date where I start my Instagram page, first post, second post. all of that done. And when that day was there, I realized that, okay, I did not have that name. So Silly Strokes was just a very quick switch that, okay, I need to like put it out now. So that is how Silly Strokes happened, because Sketchy Dreams wasn't available, and I'm happy it wasn't. So there was not a lot of thought behind Silly Strokes at that time. But yes, now if you ask me why Silly Strokes, I can whip up a good story that aligns with my business and the kind of work that I've been doing. But yes, that time it was just like a very quick thing to just avoid scolding from my mother. Um, so I've not really had clients who have not taken me seriously because of the
Mm,
name. I think mainly after I invested in my website. So initially, when I did not have a website, I was not really getting clients who would take me seriously enough to actually pay me good money. They would probably still trust the skill set that I have, or maybe after a conversation, they would be up for putting money, like getting me on board, getting some work done. But it was still not like a very good foundation for a very trustworthy relationship, at least not at first sight. So I think like building the website that I have right now was a big investment in
mm,
actually telling, like, so now a lot of people come to me and say that, okay, your name is Silly Strokes, but the strokes aren't really silly, like they're very wise and profound, and like they have all kind of words but like not silly. So people actually come to me and say that, okay, the name is fun, but your work is not silly at all. So I think that is very validating as well, and I think Silly Strokes is something that sticks with them. It's a very easy to remember name. So I think it's working perfectly for me.
mm. That's really good. It's something, it's really interesting you mentioned this. There's times when we kind of overthink. It sounded like you were overthinking the name. In fact, it was so overthought that you weren't moving forward
Yeah,
with this Instagram, which in the end it worked out fine because now you're doing something completely different, which more aligns with what you really wanted. But then suddenly you're forced to, and you just, okay, Silly Strokes is it, right? And you go
yeah,
with it, and then I think the other thing, this is actually speaking to branding, which you're knowledgeable about, right? Sometimes the word is just the right word. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it just is the right word. And then so the brand, if you think about branding, people often think branding is just like a logo or something, but it's what the impression is of everyone who sees that thing,
right.
whatever it's a brand or you or your business. And you sort of build up a story around the brand over time, right? So that coming up with a description, leveraging, this idea that the word sounds silly, but the work is not. There's a contrast there, and it opens the door for a discussion. And now all of a sudden, you're talking with a potential customer or a client, right? So I just love that story that you sort of just picked something. That's what it is. It's Silly Strokes, right? And then it
Yes.
becomes it becomes what you decide. I mean, if I go back to sketchnoting, the term that I came up with was really just describing what I felt like I was doing. I didn't really think about it. It's like, I'm just doing
Right.
sketchnoting. It seemed like the right word. Like, I didn't overthink it too much. I'm sketching and I'm taking notes, and they're kind of mixed together, and it seems to really work, right? And now there's a whole story building up around it, a community. But initially it was just sort of a off the cuff. This is the right
Right.
word, right? And now here we are. So I think that's really good to hear and encouraging. Well, let's move on to what is talk a little bit about some of the work you're doing these days. Like, what's getting you excited? Is there a project? Maybe you can't talk about the customer, but maybe like what you're doing. What gets you most excited now in this moment in time? Are there some kinds of projects or maybe a new direction that you can talk about?
Yes, so I think something that is like keeping me on my feet right now is the cohort that I'm building. So I'm in the process of like writing content for marketing and like the actual content for the course.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is something that I wake up every day thinking about that. I go to sleep thinking about
Mm.
that, and I'm doing some work every day. So I think that is big. But other than that, like in the recently in the last few months, I've started hiring. I've started adding more people to my team, which I really thought was not a possibility for me for a
Mm.
really long time. Because as illustrators and like people, especially with designers who have like their own style, and their work, like the clients come to you because of your style. So
Mm-hmm.
for a very long time I had this, block, a mind block, that I cannot add more people to my team, because then like the quality of work will be different. It'll not be like the kind of work that I'm doing, and that would like be not be fair to the clients. So for a very long time I did not like add more people to my team, and then it started to get exhausting, because like you have one project and like you have dedicated a good amount of time to that project, and then something really exciting, like even more exciting, comes up, and you're like, okay, I don't want to say no, but I don't have the bandwidth. Like that is a big struggle. And
Mm-hmm.
also, like if you want to scale, if like I cannot just consider this as a passion project anymore, or something that I want to build. Like I'm in that phase where this has to work for me now, in terms of like the finances and everything, because
Mm-hmm.
like it's been 3 years since I've started, and the work is going good. Like so now when I realized I've hit a plateau, because of like because I'm still charging based on my time, and I cannot, like I can probably earn a little more, but not after a point. So I've started hiring, and it's been very fruitful. I'm still learning how to give briefs, how to pass on a work to someone else, and like how to hire people, how to like actually um, like so many things that I missed out when I was in the job. So like I'm just trying to figure that out. So I think that has been very exciting. Especially I love being on both the sides. Like the client can call me, pass on some work that they have in their mind, some ideas, some briefs, and they can be done with it. Like okay, now my content, my ideas are in the safe hand, and that work will be delivered. So I'm getting to experience that feeling where like I have something that I want to be executed, and I can actually pass it on to someone else and have that work done. So I think that is like it frees up so much space in your mind, and I think I would recommend that to every person who wants to like convert their art into like a profitable business. That like don't wait too long to actually hire someone, get someone on your team, and actually experience this. So these are like the
Mm-hmm.
two big things. Other than that, yeah, there are projects going on. So there's this cafe that I've been working with. There's a doctor I'm working with. I never really thought that like this, this space, like the healthcare industry, was a space where doodles could be used. But I found someone like really creative and passionate about his work. So we are working together, creating some content for their clinic, and for like he teaches, so some content for like his students. Then I'm working with, like I told you, a tech company. So that is a challenging project, because every time something comes in, I need to educate myself first, dig up a lot, and then find out like good metaphors and analogies that can like represent the concept. So that has been fun. Other than that, of course, the projects where I have other people working, like for me in that scope. So I think like everything going on right now is pretty interesting, and I think I've felt that since day one. So like I just hope that this feeling just sticks.
Well, I hope so too. And the question that comes to me about what you just talked about is, so how did you overcome the block that, oh, it's not me because I'm hiring someone else? How did you solve that problem? Did you find artists who had a style like yours and they could recreate it? Or did you choose people who were just skilled, and then when a project comes in, you would say, oh, that's really good for Mary, or that's really good for John? I'm making people up here. Like, so you would have these, maybe you actually could uh, spread out your style. In other words, I have my style, I have John's style, and I have Mary's style. And based on the project, then I give it to the right person, and an available person. How did you get over that block? And then how do you sort of operate?
So I think one huge mind shift that I had that actually allowed me to do this was that drawing is a lot about thinking and not about
Mm,
execution only. And that is the mindset that I had earlier, that it is about, how I draw instead of what I draw.
Mm.
So if I can actually make someone or give someone enough room to experiment and think the way I'm thinking, or maybe even beyond the way I'm thinking, I think the execution style, I think like people are very good in copying execution styles. Like that is not something you have to be worried about. If you just give
Mm.
them 10 pieces of your work and like ask them to study them for a while, people can come up with exact replicas of your
Mm-hmm.
work.
Mm-hmm.
So execution style is not something that was a big roadblock compared to what I thought. I think it was more about the thinking style.
Mm.
And it is really fun to let people observe your work. Just speak to people for like some time, tell them why you thought of things in certain ways, and like you just see the magic happen. Like they pick up
Mm.
things, they execute things, they add their own magic to things. So I think like that is how I actually was able to share and pass on my work to like more people in my team. And I think it is going pretty well.
Mm.
Another good thing is that, especially I don't know about out of India, but in India there's a huge group of like illustrators who are very passionate, who are skilled, but who are in the Instagram rat race. Like they don't really explore their thinking and their own thoughts, their
Mm.
own emotions, or their own stories. They are like stuck in the everyday relatable content, that okay, I had this much of hair fall, this is what is happening in my relationship, and like just the very relatable everyday cliche content. And I think even if like I have the opportunity to mentor a couple of illustrators in my journey and actually like help them pivot to a better direction, better storytelling, better thought process, I think
Mm.
that is like what I aim to do. And
Mm.
like for a very long time I was also worried about like training someone, giving them all my secrets, all my thinking process, how to replicate my style. And what if they just like go away somewhere and they start something of their own? But I think till that happens, I think I will be at a more secure spot than I am right now. That is one, that is like something that I can be assured about. And second is that like when you give something so valuable to someone, like you can actually trust them on these things. Like they the artist community right now is such that like we would want to respect each other. We have that for each other, especially when you have a personal relationship with someone. Like people don't
Mm.
like do stuff like this. So I think like that fear is something that is very like not very relevant,
Mm.
especially in these times. So I think these mind shifts helped me to get people on my team.
Mm. That's really great. I think, we're talking with other people in the visual thinking space who maybe are in exactly the same place. Like, I can only go so far. I need more help. How do I get over this hump? And they might have been dealing with that same challenge, might be right now. And that this kind of thinking and talking through your process and what you're thinking about is really helpful for them to also think about and maybe find a pathway through, right? Um, I would say, as far as teaching someone all your secrets, well, there's one secret that you can't teach, and that's being you, right? So that you always have. And I think the other thing I think about is when you invest in someone like that, I've seen this, that there's more likely that you become partners and that
Yeah.
you know, when you become overloaded, you can pass work to them and vice versa, right? So you're sort of building your own community in that sense, which is another way to think of it too. So not so much of the
Absolutely.
zero sum and more of the, the growth mindset kind of approach, right? So that's really good. That's really good. This episode of the Sketchnote Army podcast is brought to you by Concepts, an infinite canvas sketching app built for tablets with a stylus, like the iPad Pro, Microsoft Surface, and Samsung Galaxy Tab. Concepts Infinite Canvas lets you spread out and sketch in any direction. Everything you draw in Concepts is a flexible vector, so you can move your notes around the canvas or change their color, tool, or size with a simple gesture. Search Concepts in your favorite app store for infinite, flexible sketching. I want to shift now to tools. So these are for all the tool people who love to hear what tools you're using. Let's start first with analog. I assume that you're using digital tools of some kind, it sounds like. But let's start with analog. What are pencils and pens, notebooks, anything like that that you like to use that are your favorite things?
So I think when I started my journey, I was doing a lot of paper, pencil, and pen work.
Mm-hmm.
I was
Mm-hmm.
using a lot of analog tools. But ever since I moved to the space where I'm working for brands and like clients, most of like my work requirements is digital.
Mm.
So I don't really use a lot of analog tools even for sketchnoting because all of my gigs so far have been like the requirement has been digital.
Yeah.
But I'm not very like I've not really explored a lot of like different types of papers or pens. There's this one Uniball pen
Mm.
that I use, and like I've just loved it so much that I've not experimented with a lot of other
Yeah.
pens. I've not really enjoyed using the Pit Artist pens because I don't think they give you like enough flow.
Mm.
But I love the Uniball pen, and I always like whenever I go out to buy stuff, I always like pick up one black Uniball pen for myself.
Mm.
With notebooks, I usually try to use a 150 to 200 GSM paper,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't like very white paper, so a
Mm.
slightly ivory color or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of like it's just good. I just like that paper. I think also because like even with my digital work, I try to put a paper texture in the background, and like I have a paper like a sticker like a what do you call it,
Screen cover.
like
Yeah.
screen cover. Yes, I have that paper like screen guard, so like the touch and the feel is very paper like,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
put that paper texture background, but I've not really experimented with a lot of analog tools.
Mm.
But yes, like with my cohort, especially when I want to like give people examples and try to help them use the analog tools, I do try and make some sketch notes before every course so that I can actually share my experience with them, whatever I learned during that process. But I've still not explored them
Mm.
well enough to actually give people tips on the tools. But with the digital tools, I'm using iPad Pro and an Apple Pencil, and I use Procreate. I've also explored concepts, and I really love the app. When I started off, I did not have an iPad, so I used my Wacom tablet with
Mm-hmm.
Photoshop on my Windows laptop. It's very painful to use that, especially on a Windows, because it's very slow, and Wacom does not allow you, like especially the one with black screen, it
Yeah.
does not allow you a lot of room to actually experiment and play around and explore the tools so well. But I started with that. I actually did make a couple of long sketch notes using my Photoshop, and I'm very proud of that. But oh my god, it is a painful process.
Well, that's good that you found a new tool and a couple of apps that make your life easier. Um,
Yes.
I'm really curious. The Uniball pen. Do you know what the number is, or what the brand or the model number is, so we can share that with others to explore?
I think it's Uniball I, and it's a
Okay.
cello pen.
Okay.
But anyways, I will like find a link, maybe an Amazon link, and I'll
Okay.
share it with you so that you can share it
Yeah.
in the keynotes.
Yeah. There might be. It sounds like something maybe you can get at the drugstore or something like that, right?
Yes,
So.
yes, like you find it everywhere here in India, definitely. Like all the
Okay.
stationery stores have them.
Okay.
But I'm not sure about outside.
Got it. And it sounds like it's really important for you to have a flowing pen,
Yeah.
thick paper, and not too white. Right. That's great.
Yes.
So we're at the point in the podcast where we do our tips. So you have listened to the show many times, so you know what I ask is: imagine someone's listening, maybe they're in India, who is interested in visual thinking, whatever that means to them. If it's sketchnoting, if it's graphic recording, if it's just being visual and drawing, maybe doing a diary, whatever that might be. And they're listening, and they feel like they've sort of reached a plateau. Like whatever they're doing is sort of like, I'm kind of tired of this. I want something new. I want to go to the next level. What would be three things that you would tell that person to help them start climbing the hill and going to the next level?
Yes. Okay. So I think like a lot of people are have that mindset that okay, if we practice enough of drawing, we'll build a style. If we practice enough of like executing anything, it'll work out for us. But I say that instead of practicing like just execution part, we should focus more on the thinking part. Like I'm a big believer in like the thinking part of drawing, which has not gotten enough emphasis. It does not get enough emphasis, I believe. So even if you have like a drawing course by someone, I think after a period you will see that you are starting to draw like them. But you don't want to do that. You want to draw like something that feels like you made it at the end
Yeah,
of the day.
yeah.
So I think instead of focusing on your skill development with the drawing, I think what is more important is how you think about it and how you execute it, not just what you think about it. Like we've been told that ideas are everything, but I think the way you execute your idea is everything. So even if like you have a better way to represent the silliest and the smallest ideas, I think people will like that better than someone who has drawn that in a very pretty elaborate way. So I think focus on your ideas, and to do that, consume a lot of good content. And also like here, like a lot of people think that copying means you're like literally doing that copy paste where you're actually just exactly copying how someone draws their eyes and the hair and the hands and everything. But I think instead of like just copy pasting, you just like observe something and try to recreate it by memory. You will learn a lot more about how they got to that point. And even if you don't really decode how they did it, you will find a way of how you can do it. And in that process you will not make something exactly the way they did, but you will like you that is how you'll develop your own style, I believe. So like I think going by the Steal Like the Artist book, I mean like do that, like observe something and draw from that instead of like just copy pasting to put something on Instagram because you're on a timer or a calendar that okay,
Yeah.
one thing has to go out every day. Like even though I'm running a business and like a lot of my gigs come from my social media platforms, I have not been focusing on them as much. And I only put out something when I like really have like one idea that I want to put out, so I design it and I put it out. So my frequency is very bad. Sometimes it's like once in a month, but work is fine. So I mean Instagram is not like the end of the world. So I would really want to tell this to all the artists out there that Instagram is not your business. Spending time on Instagram is not spending time on your business. Actually go consume, read a lot, because your mind shifts will shape your style. So I think that is like one big tip and advice, a suggestion, whatever you call it, but please execute it. I think next would be like a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on getting a beautiful work, because like that is the standard that we have said that okay, artwork has to be pretty. But again, your work does not have to be as pretty. This is an exercise that I do in all of my doodle workshops, where I ask people that okay, how many of you believe you can draw or you can't draw? So whenever I ask you can't draw, a lot of people raise their hands that okay, we can't draw. And then we do a game of Pictionary where I just ask them to like draw one thing about them, and everyone else in the group is going to guess. And most people guess what the other person is drawn. And I think that is the purpose of like making an art, especially a doodle or a sketch note, that it does not have to be pretty, but people can make meaning out of it. Right, so I mean just like draw something that anyone can make some meaning out of, and like that should be the standard. So don't put like beautiful drawings as a standard. Like my work is pretty only because my clients pay me for pretty work. Had that not been my constraint, maybe my work would not be like pretty. So like that is the case with a lot of other professional artists, that their work is pretty because that is what they're getting paid for.
Right.
But when you look at like our personal notes, it's not pretty. It's actually like not pretty at all. So like the focus should not be pretty work. And I think the third is, of course, like please, if you are trying to build a brand or actually make money or have a stable creative career, invest in yourself. Especially in India, a lot of people don't really believe in, like they will pay a lot of money to schools and colleges for degrees, but not to like people who are actually giving good content that can take you somewhere in a smaller time. So recently, I invested in Tiago Forte's Building a Second Brain course. It was a big investment, but I think even like in a month's time, I can see the results, and that has led to so many good mind shifts. exposure to a great community. Like I have deep respect for like my work after that course than I had before it. So I mean, invest in courses more than you would like to invest in a degree, because your courses, all these courses that creators are putting out, will actually take you places that you've not imagined, and it'll make you stand out of the crowd. Like that is, if that is what you're trying to achieve. So I think invest in yourself, build websites, like invest in your tech and infrastructure, do all of this for yourself. And I think like that is the one best thing that creative people can do, or anyone who is passionate about anything can do.
That's interesting that the last tip, and these are all great tips. The third one, I think a lot of times people go to school for the paper at the end, but they're not invested in learning and how it changes them during
Right.
the experience. Where what you're saying is invest in something that's applicable that you can immediately start to apply and then see an impact, right? And not so
Right.
much on the paper. It's more like the paper is what is happening to you and how you've changed, right? That's really great. These are great tips. Tanvi, so tell us, how can we find you best? I think it's your website, but maybe you've got some social media you want to send us to. Um,
Yes, I think I'm pretty active on Instagram and Twitter. Not so much on Facebook. I just have my feature on where anything on Instagram just directly goes there.
mhm.
So please don't drop me messages on Facebook. I don't check it. So it's Instagram or Facebook, and sorry, or Twitter, and you can just Google Silly Strokes. And I think by default, my SEO has been pretty strong. Like no one else thought of Silly Strokes, I guess. Uh, so if you just Google Silly Strokes, I think my website would pop up.
Yeah.
I have a newsletter where like I just like have conversations, like, give life updates, and
hmm
share anything new that I've learned, be it the personal side of like my life or the professional side. So it's like a very conversational email. So if you ever want to like just chat with me, you can just join my newsletters and like reply to them. I'm active there as well, and I love having conversations with people. So like these are the spaces where you can find me. And yes, of course, like feel free to drop me messages on Twitter and Instagram too.
Well, thank you so much, Tanvi, for being on the show. This is a really fun discussion. I think helpful for lots of people and all the things that you've gone through and you've talked about the way you thought about and solved those problems. Going to be really helpful for a lot of people. So thank you for being on the show. It's really great to meet you and have you share your story.
Thank you so much, Mike. Like this conversation has been so fun. And I hope a lot of people get to hear this, and a lot of people try and apply some stuff as well.
Yeah, I think they will. I think this is a good one. This is a winner.
Thank you.
Well, everyone, this will be another episode of the Sketchnote Army podcast. Until the next episode, talk to you soon. The Sketchnote Army podcast was created by me, Mike Rohde, and brought to you by Rohde Design Studios. It's produced and edited by Alec Polianis of Amp Creative Studios. The theme music was created by John Schiedermeyer. To support the creation of this show, I invite you to buy one of my books, the Sketchnote Handbook or the Sketchnote Workbook. You can find the books on Amazon or go to peachpit.com and use the code ROHDE40 for 40% off. Please share this podcast with other visual thinking friends, and be sure to leave a nice rating on iTunes or your favorite podcast listening app so others can find the show.